G'day, Justin Hogg from Right Source here. Another fun session indoors. Looking forward to get outdoors soon. What is GST? This is a question I get a bit at the moment. What is GST and what should I do about it if I'm a business owner? So what is GST to start with? GST, Goods and Services Tax, is a consumption tax. So what that means is effectively it's a tax designed to generate income for the government based on what people spend, so what they consume. And philosophically, I prefer this type of tax because we all have to get taxed. I prefer this tax to things like income tax or payroll tax, which tend to be a tax on productivity. So if you make a profit, you get taxed more. If you employ people, you get taxed. Those ones to me don't make a lot of intuitive sense, but activity in the economy, if people are spending money, if they've got money to spend, well, that's a good time for the government to get taxed, because the more you spend, the more you get taxed. So that way the consumer can actually, in some respects, control how much they're getting taxed. That's what GST. Now for a business, you need to register for GST. There's a number of different things, but generally speaking, you need to register for GST if you have a turnover of more than $75,000 a year, or if you anticipate to have a turnover of $75,000 a year. There are exceptions to this. For example, taxi drivers need to register straight away. Not-for-profits have different levels, but generally speaking, there's a turnover level. Now, what's interesting with this is that, well, what if I'm not expecting to turn over that much? Do I need to register? And the guidance is that, well, it's your choice. As a business owner, you can register early if you want to. So why would you? And I suppose that's a bit of information I thought I'd share to you today. What are the things you need to consider if you don't have to register for GST yet, your business isn't evolved that much yet, or you're just starting out? What are the things you need to think about as to whether you register for GST early? The first thing is, if you register for GST early, so before you hit $75,000 turnover, what you can do is it'll allow you to claim back the GST that you're paying for your expenses. So that could be 10% of your costs you get back because you're claiming it. Now, different businesses will have a different benefit here. So if you are making stuff, so say you're making craft, you've got a craft store and you're making stuff, items out of wood, and you're purchasing wood and you're having to make all those items. Those things that you buy to make those items will probably have GST on them. What registering for GST will do is allow you to claim that GST back. So it makes your input costs a little cheaper. Now, if you're a service business and you're mostly employing staff, well, there's no GST on labor. So registering for GST won't actually save you any money or allow you to claim much GST back. So probably less benefit in that regard. The other thing to look at is, who is your customer? Because this can have an impact on whether you want to register for GST sooner or later. So if your customer is a business itself, so say you're a business or business to business or B2B, quite often those businesses are used to the suppliers that they use having GST on their invoice. In fact, in some respects, when there's not GST, it actually causes that business to have to do some more work to make sure that you're correctly registered and that you aren't sending an invoice through which isn't correct. So there's an obligation on them. So in some respects, having GST when you're charging other businesses adds a little bit of credibility. And ultimately, that business claims the GST back, so they don't have a problem of whether you have GST on the invoice or not. If, however, you're selling to the end consumer, so B2C, where it's just an individual you're selling your goods to, registering for GST, all that will do is increase the amount you're charging by 10%, or take 10% off that you have to then forward to the government. So if you're selling to end consumers, probably registering for GST later would have some benefit as well. So that's the two things you really need to consider if you're going to look at registering for GST early: is what are your inputs to your business and where do they come from, and also who are you selling to. Another thing you need to then throw into the mix if you do look to register for GST is there is a hidden cost of registering for GST. So As soon as you register for GST, you then need to start compiling batch statements and reporting back to the tax office on the GST that you've collected and paid, which then means that your books need to be in order in terms of your accounting records so that you can compile those returns. And whether you do them yourself or you get someone else to do them, there's a cost in maintaining all that paperwork. So be mindful that if you do register for GST, you do want there to be a good benefit in doing that. Otherwise, the cost of complying with the requirements of registering for GST will basically erode your benefit, in which case it'd probably be better to wait until you get to that stage where you have to register for GST. The flip side of that is you should, in essence, have your books maintained because that helps with that business discipline. So there's pros and cons here. So that's a little bit of a discussion on what is GST, and as a business owner or as you're stepping into running your own business, what you need to look at in terms of when and why you register for GST. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to subscribe or check out the other videos on the YouTube channel. There's a lot of interesting stuff there for business owners and those in the mix of running their own business. Otherwise, it's Justin Hogg from RightSource. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks.